Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Chester here, music composer and producer for 45Y Music. And I got a really fun one for you today because I wasn't planning on deep diving into this library. I didn't like it when I got it. It was a library that came in a bundle. If you paid X amount, you got it for free just this past year. And there was a lot of hype about, at least in the forums I was in, it's a disappointment on this library. And it's called Cassette Symphony by Spitfire Audio. I think now that it's been released and out there a little bit, some of the minds have changed, but still just doesn't seem to be as hypeful as other offerings that they have. So when I got a request from a client to make this lo-fi track, I found an opportunity to try it out and use it again, dust it off the shelf like the other ones, and I've changed my mind completely. This is a really fantastic library. I'm amazed at it in a lot of ways, and I would like to share those ways with you. So before we begin, I want to just make a quick thing here. If you're a purist in the sample library world, you want an orchestra to do orchestral things. If you want your strings to sound like strings, your winds to sound like winds, brass to be brass, and you're not looking for anything else, then you don't probably need to worry about this video so much. There's a million libraries out there, millions of them. There are so many to choose from right now from all types of companies, and they're still pushing the bounds of what that sounds like. In fact, Spitfire has a free one, BBSEO, or I know it as Discover. That or pick up one of the Abbey Roads or pick up an Albion. But this library, I feel like it was meant to push the boundaries a little bit, to get us thinking about receiving a library like this and doing something with it, to go a bit beyond that library and try new things and experiment and have that mindset. A lot of YouTubers that review this library, they think through the lens of an orchestral library. When I saw a few scoring a picture with it or thinking like that, or using it to do mock-ups. I think you only get so far with that and you hit a ceiling pretty quickly. But if you think outside of that box and you use it for many other means, if you have ambient tracks, if you have down-tempo tracks, hip-hop tracks, lo-fi tracks, any other type of experimental track other than just the aforementioned works that I was discussing, you're going to get very far with this library and you're going to have a really fun time with it. So once again, if you're a purist, I can see why you don't like the library, don't want it, or don't accept it. And I was once that person too, but I've changed my ways and I'm really excited about this library, and I'm looking forward to diving in and showing you how I've been using it. Let's get into it. We're on the website here, and I'm not going to show much on this website. There's just some things here to note. You can check everything out. I'll have it in the description of this video. But here's the first thing I want to highlight. Look how amazing this picture is, especially if you're a geek like I am in the audio sampling world. 200 cassette players playing 800 different types of tape, and they're recording all of it in this big room. And they have like 15 speakers here, it was saying, and they're reamping an orchestra through tape machines. How cool is that? That's stunning. And not to mention, like, to be on this team, like, I'm so jealous and grateful for Spitfire to providing anyone an opportunity to do something like this. Well done. This is very cool. And then we're just gonna keep going down here. So it just says over 800 tapes were used. We got 200 custom tape cassette players, and we're gonna go over that in the deep dive when we're looking at the library. So stay tuned on that. But again, head to the site and look for all the details and information. You're going to scroll past the presets here because we'll talk about those in the video. And I want to just highlight tech specs here. So if you're running this system that's here, you're good to go. If you don't have or can't support this library, don't get FOMO. Don't worry about it. This is just an experimental library. It's here to have fun. It's not going to be a primary library that you're going to use for most of your work unless you're specifically looking for tape orchestra that's just ensemble based. Feel free to try these two libraries out. These are free lab libraries. Cassette Synth was recorded at the same time as the one we're talking about now with a Yamaha CS80, which is one of the best synths. I love this synth. It's one of my favorites, and it sounds really fun. In fact, you could probably download this and tape orchestra and once again call it good. I mean, if you can't afford Cassette Symphony, don't even worry about it. Just get these two and have a blast. All in the same applications I mentioned before. These are tape related sample libraries. So use them to your heart's content on all honesty, and you're good to go. Had I actually known that, I probably would have been in that world. I probably would have went there first and then just had my blast and maybe not even gotten this library. But we're going to still deep dive into this and discuss how cool it is, because if you have it, it's really amazing. And if you don't have it, I hope that one day there's a sale for you where you can get it. It's only 24 gigs. That's pretty generous for an orchestral like library. I think we've had enough fun on the site. Let's just dive into my template here. Here's the track that I've made for this opportunity that I'll be working on. So with lo-fi beats and with like lo-fi music, it's very minimal. You're not going to dive into a ton of tracks. You're not going to have 100 tracks and all of it being orchestral, right? Or 1,000 or anything like that. So I did want more with less, and that's why I grabbed this Cassette Symphony, because it really made my intro and outro sound unique and interesting, and I didn't have to pull samples out and dust them up and make them lo-fi. I have it in my hands now. So I orchestrated a little bit there, and then I have the hook playing more energy, same parts, but more energy thanks to Cassette Symphony. So I'm going to play some of these clips. I'm not going to bore you with the whole song, but I want to show you how it sounds with the song. So there it beefed up my intro and my outro, and then we'll go into the hook here. And here I'll solo it now. Right? And it's got a fun element to it and a really unique flavor when you're adding it. And it blends so well with music in the genre, things like that. All right, so let's just kind of dive in and see how far we get. I have this set up in a really fun way that I think works really well, not only for this project, but for any project going forward that I'm going to feel like using this library for. I'm in Ableton Live, and we don't have expression maps like Cubase or articulation maps like Logic, so I use this Max for Live patch for setting my articulations just by turning that knob. So if I open up the UI, we have these 8 articulations, and I can just turn this knob and I can go through them. I can also hit the key switches too, but typically I'm using that. So the articulations that come with Cassette Symphony are somewhat unique because they're going to be more about tape, which I thought was interesting. And I think one of the reasons why I just didn't use it right away, because I wasn't used to that concept. I'm not getting woodwind specific articulations so much as I'm getting tape articulations that were for these instruments. They're all actually pretty much the same. If you go into strings, you get the same articulations as brass, as woodwinds, and so on. So we have sustain, which is going to be a sustain note. And I'm not going to play these for anyone. There's a lot of YouTube reviews out there that do that for you. So feel free to check those out. I just want to show you application and context. Sustain monophonic, which is actually like a legato. And I want to take just 1 second to appreciate that this is a tape instrument as a legato patch. This is not woodwinds playing legato and then they're recording it. They've recorded the sustain. That's why it says sustain monophonic, because you're going to play it like legato through this instrument. And then you have a portamento here, so you can adjust that, tighten that up, and kind of make it your own. Fascinating. That's really fun. I'm very stoked about that. We have tape loop, which is kind of like an evolution, but it's a looped tape essentially, right? And that can give you some interesting results that sustain doesn't. Reels, very similar to that. Again, an evolution of a held out note from the ensemble. Scattered is like reels. Sorry, once again, I'm going to do it that way. Scattered is like reels, but it's scattered in a stereo spectrum. So it's going to move kind of in a stereo field and scatter around. So each time you hit the note, it's going to just kind of do its thing. And then we have hairpin, which almost self-explanatory. You got crescendo to diminuendo, all in a sustained note. Marcato, which is it's going to hit and then it's going to back off and just go a little bit. And then staccato is your short note, right? And that's what you're going to get for the others. And then you have your effects here, where you have the low pass filter. Tightness is for the short notes only. You have release for your long notes. Reverb for anything, you know what reverb is. Noise, which is additional noise. The samples are already going to be noisy, your tape noise, but this noise is an additional noise that you can apply to it. And it defaults at 20%. This is my first caveat / problem, is you start adding a bunch of these into your template, it's going to build up very fast with the noise, and then you need to dial it down. So I've just set them all to 0. And then for one or two of the instruments, I will turn it up and adjust the taste. And then I'll listen and go, yeah, that's the appropriate amount of noise that I want. Typically, I'm going to use some other way of processing that. That would be the way I'd go. But be careful on that. If you start loading a bunch of these and it sounds noisy, dial all these down. Get them down to 0, and then you're back at where you want to be. If you want the noise, follow your heart, turn them back up again. But I like to keep them down. This is another really cool feature. So we have the dynamic wheel here, and what it allows us to do is if we start at 0, that's the one tape, it's a single instrument source. And then we start moving it up, and it starts including more and more of the tape decks and more of the speakers, because we're increasing our stereo field. And then at 100, we're at all 200 tape decks, all speakers, and filling up the room. So that's where you get a wider sound. And then as you bring it down, it narrows down a little bit. And then it goes down to that single source of sound. Very fun, interesting way about adding the dynamics there. I was very impressed with that. That's really fun to do. And you're going to find yourself adjusting that quite a bit. And then your expression does what it always does. It's kind of just setting the volume. All right. You'll notice here that I have parallel processing going on each track. So all of my samples are for Cassette Symphony are set up this way. And I wanted to do a parallel processing, and this is why. If I take all the dry down, which is that winds patch that I was just showing you, I have worn tape. I'm going to put that at 0. And that's this right here. So we're loading up high winds, but it's worn. And what worn means is it's the cassette tape ran through cassette tape again. And what that's doing is that's degrading it a bit more and giving it more compression and giving it more saturation and just kind of making it worn out and dusty and just got a really fun sound to it. So I thought, why not set this up where if I play this, I can parallel process it and just add it in until it just sounds good to me. And I like it anywhere between 12 to 18 the most, but sometimes 7 actually even. So we'll leave it around here. But that sounds really fun, and parallel processing that, you get really great results. In fact, I strongly encourage and challenge you to, if you have this library, to add those worn patches to other libraries as well and just hear the results in parallel process. So try Albion, try like Tundra and Neo, and try the Oliver Arnold strings. Try this with orchestral tools or synthasamples or anything, synthesizers. This library, I really feel like it was really meant for us to experiment with and find really interesting results anywhere we can through the means of tape. And that was one of my ways of figuring that out and understanding that this library can go in a lot of ways. So layer it with that dusty, worn sound, layer that in with another instrument, and blend it and have really fun results with that. You're gonna enjoy it. Let's see. That leads me into another caveat. However, these Spitfire audio, and I know I'm gonna sound like a broken record the more that I review these UIs that are specific for Spitfire. I really would like to purge the samples. I'm not going to use all these samples with how I have this set up. So it would be fantastic for me to be able to just take that all down at 6 gigs just to sit here and kind of parallel process on a couple parts. A little much, if you ask me, but what can we do? What else have we seen? This is very easy to distort signals depending on the patch that you have set up. Dynamics and expression, I found when I work with those, I can get down to remove some of that distortion. So just keep your ears listening to this sound, because every once in a while, depending on your settings, you can get a really aggressive distortion that you're going to need to solve for, depending on how much you have going on. Now, in a lot of reviews, it was said that this is a very niche library, and back in the day, I would agree when I got it. However, now that I'm looking at this through a new lens, I would say that it's only niche to the ceiling that you put it at. And that's where I was saying, I think a lot of folks would originally grab this library and plop it in as their orchestral library. So rather than putting in Albion, they're going to put in this and use it like Albion. And I think that's where your ceiling hits, and it hits very quickly. But what I've found is if you go for the experimentation route, you run it through multi-effects plugins like Guitar Rig or stock plugins. In fact, what I did is I ran it through some guitar pedals, and I want to show you those results. So here's the high strings running through some guitar pedals. Right? You get the idea. So I ran it through a wah, started with the wah pedal, and then it went to MXR Phase 90, the ever-loved orange phaser. I have to look because I don't remember. Super shifter on some of that. And then the Boss RE20, the Space Echo. And then that goes through a Sans amp, just coloring it a little bit more. But that wah is really what's making it staticky and kind of aggressive. I think it's an old wah, Dunlop wah, I think. And that's what I'm saying. This library is extremely forgiving. You can run it through some gear, cheap or new or whatever else, and run it into the ground. Do whatever you want with it. It's tape. I wouldn't be doing this so much with a really nice $800 library, because I bought that to get the crisp, clear samples. But this library, no, run it through everything. Like this is where I'm like the most excited. Take this one around the block, like have it do things that you wouldn't want this library to typically do, because it's tape. It's just, it's already started. It's already begun the whole journey for you. All you have to do now is see where you end it, right? And each time you pull this library into your template or project, you can do something different and special with it. And it's going to really cater well to those projects, because it's a very forgiving library. You can really destroy it. You can make it more interesting. You can take it to the universe. You can bring it to the moon. There's so many ways to go about this library. And so I want to encourage creativity when you pull this library and start using it, because it's there. I mean, it's waiting for it to happen. And I got to commend Spitfire. I feel like that's where they were coming from when they released this library, to see how far the bar goes, how we can raise it up and push the envelope further and make these libraries more fun and more interesting for ourselves. So well done in that regard. And I think that's the lens we need to have, less so the purist and more so the experimenter, and challenge ourselves to really dive in with our production skills and say, where are we going to take it today? That's pretty much it. So in conclusion, I love the dynamics, this mod wheel going from 200 to 1 tapes and playing the instrument and adjusting that to taste. I didn't do it as much as I'd like in this I had to knock this out very fast turnaround. So I didn't do much there, but I would go back and do it again. It's a very creative library. It's fantastic. It's a lot of fun. The monophonic sustain legato genius. I really think that that's fun, and you're going to make some really fun melodies with it. I'm looking forward to trying that out myself. Again, I wasn't able to quite get there with this. The worn tape presets that it came with, loved parallel processing those and blending those in. If you're looking to layer libraries, this is a great option for you. Something that sounds a little bit different than others. And then you layer those with your libraries that can kind of sound the same or monotonous or typical, and you're going to get really fun, interesting results. Careful with your low pass filter, because when you have tape, you have some noise in areas that you would normally just filter that out and get your patch going. So just make sure you keep an eye and ear on low passing that and being generous with those settings, because you might get too much and it's going to not sound as special when you remove some of that good high frequency goodness that you're going to get in this library. The release setting, I don't understand the idea of using percentage. It's release time, right? That's the setting. So we should see time there. That was interesting for me seeing that. Spitfire, from what I've seen and what I've reviewed so far, there were seconds and milliseconds. So I don't know what that was about. I hope we don't see that trend. I would love to see release time and it being time, but I guess we'll see where that goes or what was going on there. The articulations, that was pretty creative and special, just being tape and all of them roughly being the same. I understand that now and the idea behind that. So that was cool. I didn't see any mic options, which maybe that's because of how they recorded this library. But for $250, you do see mic options from time to time. So it just seemed light on settings in a library that was priced this way compared to other Spitfire libraries. So therefore, I kind of think it's worth a little less, 150, maybe 100. I would wait for a deal to get this library. If you're looking for a really awesome layering option, 1 to 150 is pretty generous as far as price goes. I wouldn't usually go too much beyond that. 200, 250, sure, if you can afford that and you're going to use this a ton and it's going to come back on an investment, by all means. And then at the end there, I was saying a very forgiving library. Experiment with it. Use multi-effects tools. Try guitar rig. Try stock effects. Try pedals. Just have fun with this library at the end of the day. All right, so as we can see, not much to be scared about with this library. And originally, I kind of was on the ride and on the same side as some of the purists that were not interested in the library like this. I kind of agreed with them originally. But now that I'm looking back, I'm very grateful that I didn't listen to all the noise that was going on back then. And I still ended up pursuing the 3 libraries that ended up getting me this library at the time. So I'm glad that happened, because when you look at this library at the end of the day, very fascinating, very unique, and very fun to experiment with. So once again, I really challenge you to have fun with this library and enjoy it if you have it. And if you don't have it and you don't have the money for this library, pick up those 2 free lab libraries, those free labs libraries, and have fun with those and do the same things with those and try them with other libraries as well. You'll get the same results as we did here. We just have a little more flexibility in our winds and brass and strings and percussion where we can mix and blend those and do fun things with them. Not to say that we have to, that tape orchestra is going to do the same. All right. Well, thanks for watching the video. I hope this was helpful for you. I hope that this inspired you in some way or helped you make the decision on if Cassette Symphony is for you or not. And if you have Cassette Symphony, I hope that this allows you to pick it up again and give it a shot and experiment with it. Or if you were like me, looking at it from the purist direction of orchestra and having a hard time understanding what this library would ever be used for, reevaluate it through the new lens and find a way to experiment with it and play with it and make it something very special for you. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Take care.